Okay, so today is episode 3, and I thought today we would cover action bars. And what action bars are, in case you don't know, is all of the buttons right here that you put all your spells on. As you can see, I have two stacks that are pretty full. These are mainly things that I do not use very frequently. These are my spells that I use during fights and stuff like that. So, how do you arrange these? Well, last time on episode 2, I showed you how to arrange all of your anchors by going into the configuration and toggle anchors. And as you can see, I have bars 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I also have a couple of other bars that I could use. They're called extra action bars. um, that are currently not enabled, but I have the ability to add some more. 7 and 8 are part of those extra action bars, and then I have 9 and 10, which are not enabled. And I'll show you those later on. So here are the extra action bars, and then this, let's see if I can find it for you real quick. Add-ons, frames. There it is, extra action bars. So there's the extra action bars right there. And what I'll do is I'll go over those a little bit later on, and we'll get rid of all of this stuff here, and then we'll go into these a little bit later on. As you can see, 9 and 10 are not enabled. If I was to enable them, then you would see them. There they are right there. That's 10, and there's 9. So I could actually enable them and put them someplace else. So let's say I wanted them over here. I could put them over here and put something on them. For example, let's say I want to move all of my mounts over there. Well, I could actually put an extra action bar. As a matter of fact, while we're doing this, I'll move 9 over there, and I'll show you how to set that one up. And I'll move all of my mounts over there. Um, but first, let's start with the action bars. So the action bars are either enabled or disabled for each one of them. So in other words, I have all of my action bars enabled. This is under the action bar tab, which is right here. And then everything else is a sub tab beneath that. So let's talk first about enabling and setting up the general content on your extra action bars. And any change here will affect your action, all of your action bars. Okay. So first thing you want to do is you want to make sure they're enabled. Don't worry about key binding. We'll discuss that later. This button right here will display or hide your macro text. So if I was to enable my macro text, you'd see my macro text right here. And where does that macro text come from, you might ask? Well, if you go into your macro panel, you can see that I have macro set up right here. And it's this text right here. So there's detox. There's detox. This is my macro that I use for infuse and rising sun kick, which is right here. So that's a combination. So it depends on whether the target is friendly or not. But macros is another content later on. Basically, what I want to show you is this is where it's pulled from. So if we take a look at this, that's where those would come from. And then key binding text. So as you can see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are my first 6 buttons on my mouse because all of my key bindings are on my razor. And I then press Shift 1 through 6 to get these buttons, and then Alt 1 through 6 to get these buttons. Now, the as you can see, this is an Alt middle button. This is a Shift middle button, and this is my middle space button. The rest of these are not key bound. These buttons right here, there's nothing key bound to them, but whenever I hit an enemy, that talent is used. So that's the key binding text. Key down means normally with the game, when you actually press a button, it doesn't in in it doesn't cast a spell. But when you have your key down set, anytime that you cast with your button down, that's when it'll cast. So it just gives you a couple extra seconds of not having to press and release, or if you accidentally press and hold something and it didn't cast, well, it's because that button was down and you don't have the key down. It'll normally on release do it. Okay, so lock action buttons. This means that I cannot, as you can see, I cannot pick these up. However, by using the shift button, I can then take them off my bar. So I locked it, but I have it shift set. The next thing is hide cooldown blink. So that's a flash when it comes off of cooldown. Let's see, these are all set for mouse over. So let's see. There we go. So as you can see, G burst is now on cooldown, and in 20 seconds it'll flash when it comes off cooldown, and you'll see it right here in a second, or you should. And it may not until I actually save. I close out and save it. So let's see if this happens. Yeah, see, and I didn't save it yet, so um, all right. Anyways, we'll get back to that later on. But that's what that's for. And use draw swipe. It shows a swipe animation when your spell is recharging, but still has charges left. So, in other words, when I use infuse, I have two swipe. As you can see, this now has a swipe. So you'll see that when there is a charge left, a good example may be the G roll. I have two, and if I was to use this, it would still show, but have the swipe. Okay. Global fade transparency. Transparency level not in combat. No target exists. Full health existing. So on and so forth. Okay, I'm not going to read all this to you. In generally, I don't set this, but that is an option that's up to you. So the other thing you can do is you can change your colors. So if someone's out of range right now, it's red. If I'm out of power, in other words, I'm out of mana, it'll be blue. Unstable is white, and not unstable is gray. Okay. Okay. So this is the fonts. This is what sets your fonts on your action bars. So I have the rest of mine set for Expressway. So I use Expressway 15 is also a standard that I use. And I also like to outline the text. So that gives it a thin outline. And then this is the color of the text. If I was to change the text to, I don't know, red, then, and hit OK, you can see the color on all my text turned red. But I like to have white as my standard. So now it's all back to white. If you use mask, you can set mask support for certain bars, whether it's all of your action bars, your bed bars, or your stance bar. That's simple. All right, let's talk key bindings. Key bindings is what you use to set your key bindings. You do that by clicking this button, and there is another way, and I'll get that to you. And pressing the button, mouse over the button, and then press that button that you want, and then you save it. So key binding, as you can see, this brings up this window, and I want to set button number 1, which isn't a change, but that's okay. Hit save, and then my key binding is set, and you will get a message saying that your binding was set. All right, and then the next thing is your actual bars. So your boss button is that button that shows up. It's your extra action button that shows up when you have an action. A good example in this case is Gul'dan as a healer. I would have the one that puts the bubble over everybody. That button is the boss button. You can, and mine shows up right here. If I was to toggle, you'd see that boss button right there, and that's a zone ability. Um, but that's what that button is. And the only thing you can really do with it is set your alpha and set your scaling. And I just leave both of those at 100. Your micro bar is your basically your menu bar for Blizzard. Now, right now, I have mine set for mouse over. And again, you can set your alpha on this, and alpha means transparency. Is how transparent is it? You can see what I mean. There's your transparency. You can set it to extremely transparent. If you set it to 0, it disappears. But I like to use the mouse over. And what that does is anytime the mouse over is set, whenever I mouse over this, it allows me to see that. But in normal day-to-day activities, I don't see it. Um, and you can also enable and disable this. Wouldn't recommend disabling. Okay, so action bar 1, which means these 12 buttons right here. First of all, I've enabled it. If you to press this, it would restore it to what the factory default is for these things. You can decide whether you want the backdrop on or off. Okay, I have backdrop on, and you can see what it does when I click it. All right. Um, show empty buttons. So these buttons right here that are empty are being shown because I set that on all of them. And again, you can set this for mouse over. Maybe you want it to disappear only except for when you have mouse over, just like I do with the micro bar. That's what you would do. Um, so you can have an inherent global fade set on your action bars, which again I don't use, so it's up to you. And this is how you're anchored. So I have top left. So top left is this one. If I was to set it bottom left, it would go down to here. And there we go. It just flipped it. Or correction. Bottom left is here. Bottom right is here. Under normal circumstances, I usually set all mine for top left, and that's just for continuity. All right, so buttons. This is the number of buttons that are displayed. If I was to put 6, I would have 1 row. And there you go. That's 1 row of buttons. And buttons per row, let me change this back to 12. And buttons per row means I have 6 buttons per row. And if there are 12 buttons, there's 2 rows of 6. 12 is the max buttons per action bar. And then this is your button size. You can make this as small or as large as large as 60 and as small as 15. So if I was to go 15, you see how small they are. So you can make different bars, different sizes if you want. I like it mid-range, so there's 30. All right. Button spacing is the amount of spacing between each button. So mine is set for 2, and it works good for me. And then button, backdrop spacing is 2 as well. Height multiplier, I, under normal circumstances, don't use, but it multiplies the backdrop height or width by value. So if I was to set 2, it would multiply it by 2. You can go as high as 5. And the width multiplier is the same thing. And then this sets the alpha on it. So you can fade it out if you want. Now, these are the bonus buttons. And usually what happens is, if a good example is a druid, if you change forms into, say, bear form, then um, that would change that button to button number 12 or button 7, 8, or 9. So if I was to toggle, and remember I had 9 and 10 over here, if I was to toggle, 7 would go up here. If I was to, let's say, change shapes, and again, the best one to use an example is druids is where this would go, or even rogues would be using this as well. So that would take experimenting to see what you want. So you could actually hide it completely and then put um, that would show up here still when you maybe change shape or whatever. Um, and then you can also tell the action bar to pet battle hide or show, uh, vehicle override. You can do that as well. As a matter of fact, let's do this. Now let's leave 1 and 2 up because there are examples where you would actually use in what Blizzard considers a vehicle. So um, and and the thing is 1 through 6, and even 7, 8, 9, and 10 are set up the same way. So these are the standard Blizzard ones, 1 through 6, and they're no different. And then you can decide how you want to set these up. Now, let's see. So here's one right here I set for 6 buttons, and this is 4. So if I was to toggle 4, it's this one. So I have 12, 12, 12, and then 6. And I do that just for the way I want to stack my buttons. And you can stack it any way that you want. And this is so user friendly. Um, so the next thing, pet bars. You only see this when you're in a pet battle. Um, and as you can see, I have it enabled, and it's all the same. These settings right here are all the same as these bars. But notice you don't have the visibility status. Or correction, it's not the visibility status; it's the action status right there. You don't have that one, so you can change the settings here, but not the other ones. The stance bar. You stance bar you could have enabled or disabled. It doesn't matter. For example, monks used to have 2 stances as healers they could go into. Um, Now it's a talent. So I used to have that enabled. Now I can disable it. If you do have one that has stances, for example, a warrior, you may be in defensive stance. You can have that showing if you want, not required though. All right, so that's the standard action bars. And then when we go into the action bars themselves, um, so I'm on this tab right here, and this is actually a module that you can download as well. I'll try to find it and put in the description below for you. But um, bars 7, 8, 9, and 10 are extras. Under normal circumstances, you only have 1 through 6. I have 7 and 8 enabled, 9 and 10 are disabled. But the setup is exactly the same as the um, as the other one, as 1 through 6. You can set up everything exactly the same, no difference. And again, moving them around is no different than I showed you last episode 2, on your reputation, or correction, your bars. You set them up the same way. You drag them into position. You nudge them using your nudge, and you can use your sticky frames to lock them together. Once you do that, you've got your bars set up. Now, again, this is how I set mine up because it's user friendly for me. I can look at it, I know what I'm looking at. I have my rate frames right in the middle, and that's how you set those up. If you have any questions, comments, if I didn't cover something that you have a question on, or if I went too fast for you, let me know, and I'll try to answer them. Just put it in the remarks down below. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.